All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're building a narrative around a fascinating case study unfolding in the retail sector right now. We're taking a really close, objective look at the ongoing labor dispute between one of the most successful tech giants in history and its frontline retail workers. By looking strictly at the data, the first-hand accounts, and the timeline of events, we're going to see exactly what happens when massive corporate structures meet ground-level organization.
To really set the stage for this narrative, we've got to look at the official corporate credo. Apple explicitly states, "The soul of Apple is our people." This establishes a pretty clear baseline for the company, right? It's a very public declaration that they view their employees as the absolute core of their identity and success. Keep this credo in the back of your mind, because the tension between this stated value and the reality that workers are reporting is the central theme of our analysis today.
Just to put things into perspective, we are dealing with a massive macro scale here. We aren't talking about a local mom-and-pop shop. We are analyzing a corporate behemoth with a market capitalization of nearly $3 trillion. It's literally the second most valuable tech company in the world. When a company is operating at this kind of astronomical financial level, with massive stock buybacks and immense profits, the expectations from both the public and its employees are naturally amplified. So the crucial question driving our story today is this: what happens when a $3 trillion company's values are actually put to the test right there on the retail floor? How do these immense corporate resources interact with ground-level labor relations? We're going to explore this through a specific narrative playing out at a single retail location, tracking how these grand corporate strategies filter down to the daily lives of the people actually selling the products.
Let's start things off with Section 1, the catalyst, focusing on the Towson union vote.
The whole narrative really centers on one retail store in Towson, Maryland. The timeline really tells the story here. Workers at this location actually won their union vote with the Machinists Union way back in June of 2022. But fast forward through 2023 and into the present day, 2 full years later, and they are still locked in drawn-out negotiations for a first contract. The finish line just seems to be nowhere in sight, which has ultimately led to mediation and the very real threat of a strike.
So why the stall? Well, let's look at what's actually on the table. The workers brought forward some core demands, mainly emphasizing fair wages to keep up with inflation and basic living costs. Specifically, they're asking for a 6% overall wage increase. The workers noted that, given the company's massive stock buybacks and huge profits, a 2% raise just didn't really align with the available capital. Plus, driven by ongoing concerns that date all the way back to COVID-19, they proposed creating a health and safety committee to establish a solid routine around store safety.
Moving right along to Section 2, Strategy of the Stall, where we examine the bargaining tactics.
This is where the story gets really interesting. When we look at the friction at the bargaining table, a massive disparity emerges. Workers detailed putting forth concrete proposals, like that 6% wage increase. But the corporate responses they reported? After waiting hours during a negotiation session, they claimed the company's counteroffer would sometimes literally just be a screenshot of a web page showing the existing company policy. And when the union proposed the Health and Safety Committee, workers report the initial corporate response was to practically scoff at them, claiming they already consult with top health professionals. Interestingly enough, workers later found out the company rolled out similar safety committees to non-unionized stores a year later.
And this narrative of delay gets wildly specific. Workers felt like a deliberate tactic of drawing out the process was absolutely in play here. They report that early on in bargaining, entirely whole sessions were eaten up just trying to lock down the preamble and the literal physical address of the store. When you need multiple meetings just to agree on the building's address, you can completely see why employees felt they were experiencing what they called a gaslighting tactic, designed to just exhaust their momentum.
Which brings us to Section 3, Operational Impact, looking at schedules and attrition.
So how do these macro-level negotiation delays actually translate to the sales floor? Well, following what workers described as a brutal anti-union campaign, the Townsend store entered a status quo state. Now, this is legally intended to maintain existing conditions post-vote, but management allegedly weaponized it. Workers report that when a highly requested brand-new scheduling system rolled out to other locations, a system that actually addressed many of the union's demands, like allowing consecutive weekdays off, the Townsend store was excluded. Management allegedly cited that status quo state of the unionized store as the exact reason they couldn't receive these new benefits.
To make matters more complicated, there's a major logistical headache. Historically, the Towson Mall was open until 9 p.m., and the company requires its retail employees to have 4 hours of customer-facing time in their availability. But the mall ended up shifting its closing time to 8 p.m. Because management allegedly refused to budge on the scheduling requirements for this specific store under the new hours, employees suddenly found their availability completely upended.
And this isn't just a minor inconvenience. It has a profound human impact. Workers report that this rigid scheduling enforcement under the new mall hours has severely and disproportionately hit specific demographics. It's hit part-time employees the hardest, specifically women of color, mothers who need to pick up kids after school, and folks relying on a second job just to make ends meet. The workers point out that the company simply won't budge, which ends up pushing out the very people they claim are the soul of the company.
On top of that, the day-to-day culture in the store has allegedly shifted. Workers claim a highly punitive environment has taken root. They estimate there are about 6 to 8 discipline-related conversations happening on the floor every single day. Employees have expressed that any conversation about the union or their workplace issues feels like it's going to be met with punishment, which obviously creates an atmosphere of deep tension and secrecy.
When you combine low morale, strict scheduling, and stalled bargaining, the real-world consequences are pretty severe. The Towson store's headcount has plummeted from a peak of around 140 workers all the way down to just 87. It's a dramatic attrition rate, and honestly, that tells a powerful narrative all on its own about the working conditions inside this location over the last 2 years.
Let's move into Section 4, Escalation and Mediation.
Faced with a shrinking staff and a punitive environment, the narrative had to shift toward formal escalation. The stalled bargaining forced the union's hand, leading them to file unfair labor practice charges against the company, basically asserting that they were not negotiating in good faith. This legal pressure forced a formal mediator to step in to try and bridge this massive gap. But as the frustration just boiled over, it culminated in the workers officially voting to authorize a strike if a fair contract can't be reached.
So, with a mediator in the mix, where do things stand right now? Well, they did manage to secure a tentative agreement recently regarding time and attendance policies. So, a small bit of progress. However, the heavy hitters, the financials, that requested 6% wage increase, and those open unfair labor practice charges, those remain completely 100% unresolved.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, a looming deadline.
Now, despite all this tension, the attrition, and yes, even the strike authorization, it is absolutely crucial to understand where the workers' heads are actually at. The retail employees stress that they do not want to strike. One worker actually said, "There's something magic that happens when you teach somebody how to utilize technology and have that wow moment." You see, they're fans of the brand. They genuinely love the technology. They want a fair contract simply so they can afford to stay and continue providing that expert, face-to-face passion that customers completely expect when they walk through the doors.
Wrapping up this analysis, we're left with a pretty provocative question. How exactly does a $3 trillion tech giant balance its massive profits with the daily realities of its retail workforce? If the soul of the company truly is its people, like the credo says, does the reality on the retail floor actually reflect that narrative? The workers have made their stance very clear. They've authorized a strike, and now the story awaits its next chapter, leaving the next move entirely in the corporation's hands. Take a moment to really think about how these corporate dynamics shape the retail experiences we all have every single day. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.